Welcome to Calm Before Dreams, a quiet place where gentle stories and soft atmospheres guide you toward peaceful rest. Tonight, our journey takes us onto a softly lit night train, moving slowly through the rain-dark countryside. Outside the windows, distant lights drift past, the rhythm of the rails steady and soothing, while old stories and quiet histories seem to travel with us through the night. I'm Atlas, and I'll be your narrator for this evening's story, The Quiet History Hidden on a Rainy Night Train. Before our train begins its quiet journey through the rain and darkness, I'd love to know where you are listening from tonight. Share it in the comments below. It's always comforting to see how far our calm little community reaches across the world. Now settle in, take a slow breath, and let the gentle rhythm of the train carry you into tonight's story. Tonight my story begins on a small railway platform where the rain has been falling long enough to soften every sound and blur the edges of the world. I arrived there without a clear plan, carrying only a quiet restlessness that had followed me through the evening streets of Maple Hollow. Some feelings do not ask permission, they simply guide your steps until you find yourself somewhere unexpected. The platform was narrow, its wooden boards dark with rain, its single lamp casting a warm circle of light that trembled whenever the wind passed through the trees. Beyond that light the tracks stretched into darkness, two silver lines disappearing between fields and low hills. I remember thinking how ordinary the place looked. A weathered bench, a peeling station sign, a roof that creaked softly whenever the rain gathered along its edge. Nothing about Briar Glen Crossing suggested that anything unusual ever happened there. And yet something in the air felt patient, as though the station had been waiting longer than I understood. I stood there listening to the rain and realized I was not waiting for a train exactly. I was waiting for whatever came with it. For a while there was only the platform and the rain. I stood beneath the narrow roof and listened to the water collect along its edge before falling in steady threads to the wooden boards below. Each drop made a soft tapping sound that blended into the quiet rhythm of the night. The air was cool but not unpleasant, carrying the clean scent of wet earth, iron rail, and distant pine drifting down from the hills. My coat rested lightly on my shoulders, still damp from the walk through town. I had not hurried to the station. In truth, I had not meant to come here at all. Yet my feet had carried me along the dark road past the last row of houses, past the silent hardware store and the closed diner on Mill Road, until the railway platform appeared in the rain like a small island of light. Behind me, Maple Hollow had already gone to sleep. Porch lights glowed faintly behind curtains. Windows were dark. Somewhere a dog barked once and then settled again. The station was the only place still awake. A barrel beside the steps slowly filled with rainwater. The roof creaked now and then as the damp wood adjusted to the night air. Somewhere nearby a thin stream moved quietly over stone, hidden in the darkness beyond the tracks. Nothing asked anything of me there. No timetable demanded attention. No conductor called for passengers. No distant whistle broke the calm. The rails themselves seemed content to rest, shining faintly under the lamplight, stretching forward into the wet darkness as though they already knew where they were meant to lead. I breathed in slowly and felt the night widen around me. For the first time that evening, there was nowhere else I needed to be. So I waited. The station was called Briar Glen Crossing. During the day it would have looked modest enough to forget almost immediately. A narrow platform, a small waiting room with two benches and an iron stove, and a station clock that, according to people in town, lost a few quiet minutes every month. The painted sign above the window had once been cream-colored, though years of weather had softened it into a shade somewhere between gray and pale yellow. But on a rainy night the place became something else entirely. Amber light from the platform lamp drifted through the mist and settled across the wet boards in a gentle circle. The tracks reflected the glow in long silver lines that trembled whenever raindrops touched the metal. The air smelled of soaked cedar, old iron, and the faint dusty memory of coal that seemed to live deep within the wood of the platform itself. I walked slowly to the edge and looked down the line. At the far end of the platform stood a luggage cart no one had used in years. Its wheels were rusted into stillness, and beneath it a shallow puddle trembled with every falling drop. Near the station wall rested a cracked flower pot that must have once held bright summer geraniums, though now it contained only dark soil and rainwater. The ticket window was closed, its glass clouded by age. Beyond the station lay open countryside, black tree lines, pasture fences dark with rain, and telephone poles leaning slightly as though tired from decades of weather. The land felt quiet but not empty. It seemed to be resting the way fields sometimes do after harvest. Nothing about the place was grand or impressive. It was simply real. And because it was real, the silence there did not feel lonely. It felt patient. Before I reached the railway, I had walked through Maple Hollow while the evening was gently closing itself. It is a small town that moves according to habits older than most of its buildings. People do not rush much there. The streets are modest, the shops practical, and the days follow a rhythm that rarely surprises anyone. In the morning the baker's door opens first, letting warm bread scent drift across Main Street. By mid-morning the diner fills with familiar voices and slow cups of coffee. Trucks pass through the crossroads beside the church, and someone always pauses on the sidewalk to talk about weather, roofs, crops, or cousins. But evening brings a different quiet. The hardware store closes before the sky loses its last color. The grocer pulls down the shade over the front window. Lights dim behind the pharmacy glass where rows of bottles glow faintly like small lanterns. After that, Maple Hollow begins to settle. Curtains close. Porch lights burn softly in the damp air. Kitchen windows fog with warmth. From the road you can see small pieces of ordinary life still moving inside the houses. Someone washing the last dishes of the night. Someone leaning back in a chair beside a low radio. Someone writing careful numbers in a notebook at the end of a long day. Dogs turn in circles before lying down near back doors. A porch swing creaks once in the wind and grows still again. The town rests early. Yet sometimes, on quiet rainy evenings, a person feels something that does not belong entirely to routine. It is not urgent. Just a small feeling that the night is not quite finished yet. That somewhere beyond the quiet streets and dark windows, something patient is waiting. That feeling is difficult to explain. But it is strong enough to make a person put on a coat, step outside into the rain, and begin walking toward the old station. I had been standing on the platform long enough that the rhythm of the rain had become familiar. When something changed, it took a moment for me to notice. At first it was not a sound exactly. More a suggestion of movement somewhere beyond the hills. The rails beneath the lamplight seemed to hold a faint tension, as though the metal itself remembered the weight of passing wheels. I leaned forward slightly, looking down the dark line where the tracks disappeared into the countryside. For a while nothing happened. The rain continued its patient falling. The roof creaked once above me. Wind moved through the trees beyond the fence, carrying the smell of wet leaves and distant pine. Then very softly I heard it, a low, steady rhythm. Not loud enough to echo across the fields. Not sharp enough to break the calm of the night. Just the distant turning of wheels somewhere far along the track. The sound did not hurry. It approached with the same quiet patience the station itself seemed to possess. Each moment brought it a little closer, though the darkness still hid whatever was making it. I found myself standing straighter without realizing it. Something about the sound felt familiar, though I was certain no regular train passed through Briar Glen Crossing at this hour. The town timetable had stopped listing night routes years ago. Yet the rails were humming now, faintly alive beneath the rain. A glow appeared far down the track. Not the harsh beam of a modern engine, but a warmer light, steady and amber, like the lanterns sometimes used in older stations. The shape of the train slowly formed within the mist. It did not arrive with noise or urgency. It simply came forward through the rain as though it had always belonged to the night. And when it finally rolled beside the platform, slowing with calm certainty, I realized something strange. I had the quiet feeling that the train had expected me to be there. The train came to a gentle stop beside the platform, its wheels settling into stillness with a soft metallic sigh. Steam drifted lightly along the carriages, dissolving into the rain like breath in cold air. The windows glowed with warm amber light. For a moment nothing happened. No loud announcements. No rush of passengers stepping down. No hurried voices calling across the platform. Only the rain tapping quietly on the roof of the station and the faint ticking sound of cooling metal. Then a door near the center of the train opened. A narrow set of steps unfolded toward the platform, and a man stepped into the lamplight holding a lantern whose glow matched the warm color of the carriage windows. He was tall and composed, wearing a dark coat that seemed both old-fashioned and perfectly natural for the night. The lantern light reflected softly on the wet boards as he paused at the top of the steps. I understood immediately that he was the conductor. But there was something unusual about him, though it took me a moment to realize what it was. He did not appear surprised to find someone waiting. Instead, he looked at me with the calm recognition of a person greeting a traveler who had arrived exactly when expected. "Evening," he said quietly. His voice carried easily through the rain, steady and warm without being overly formal. It was the sort of voice that belonged to someone accustomed to long journeys and patient hours. I nodded in return, though I was not entirely certain what to say. "This train," he continued, glancing briefly down the line as though confirming something only he could see, "does not stop here very often." The lantern swayed slightly in his hand. Raindrops shimmered in the light before falling to the platform. For a moment we stood in comfortable silence, the two of us in the quiet train resting beside the station. Then he stepped aside from the doorway and said gently, "You're welcome aboard if you'd like to continue the night." He did not ask where I planned to go. He simply waited. I stepped onto the train without quite deciding to. The wooden steps were damp but steady beneath my boots, and as I reached the top, the conductor lifted the lantern slightly to guide the way into the carriage. Inside, the air felt warm and calm, carrying the quiet scent of polished wood and faint tea leaves. The lantern light blended with the soft glow of wall lamps that lined the interior, giving the whole carriage a gentle golden color. The door closed behind me with a careful click. The conductor nodded once as though acknowledging that something had been completed, then moved down the aisle with unhurried steps. I heard him check a lamp near the far end before disappearing briefly into the next carriage. I remained near the doorway for a moment, taking in the room. The seats were upholstered in dark fabric that had clearly seen many years of travel. Wooden panels ran along the walls, their surfaces worn smooth by time and quiet use. Above each window hung a small lamp whose light reflected softly on the rain-streaked glass. Outside, the platform lamp blurred into amber streaks as droplets slid down the window. There were only a few passengers. An elderly woman sat by one window, holding a small wooden music box in her lap. Her coat was buttoned neatly to the throat, and a pair of gloves rested beside her on the seat. She watched the rain with the calm patience of someone long familiar with waiting. A young man sat further down the carriage with a notebook open across his knee. He wrote slowly, pausing often as though listening for the right words rather than searching for them. Near the end of the car, a woman held a cup of tea between her hands, her gaze turned toward the dark countryside sliding past the glass that no one spoke. Yet the silence did not feel awkward, that it felt shared. The train began moving again, so smoothly that I only noticed when the station lamp drifted away into the rain behind us. The motion of the train was slow and steady, almost soothing. I took a seat beside one of the windows and watched as Briar Glen Crossing slipped quietly into the darkness behind us. The platform lamp grew smaller, then vanished entirely as the fields closed around the railway line. Rain traced wandering paths down the glass. Fence posts appeared briefly in the lamplight before fading back into shadow. Trees stood in silent rows beyond the tracks, their branches dark against the misted sky. Inside the carriage, the atmosphere remained calm and unhurried. The elderly woman opened the lid of her music box for a moment, studying the faded velvet inside before closing it again without winding the mechanism. Her hands moved with the careful grace of someone who had carried the same object for many years. The young man continued writing in his notebook. Every few minutes he paused, looking out into the darkness as though the passing landscape might offer the next line. When he resumed, his pen moved slowly but with quiet certainty. The woman with the tea seemed content simply to watch the rain. Steam drifted lightly from her cup, and the scent of bergamot reached me faintly across the aisle. Time felt different inside the carriage. Not slower exactly, just softer. The usual urgency of clocks and schedules seemed to have been left behind at the station. Here the journey moved according to another rhythm. Wheels turning beneath the floor, rain tapping gently against the windows, lamps swaying almost imperceptibly with the motion of the train. After a while the conductor passed through the aisle again, his lantern casting small circles of light along the wooden floor. He paused beside each passenger briefly, not asking questions or checking tickets, only making sure the lamps burned steadily and that the quiet atmosphere remained undisturbed. When he reached my seat, he inclined his head politely. Then he continued down the carriage, leaving behind the comfortable sense that the train knew exactly where it was going, even if I did not. After some time, I began to notice something unusual about the journey. At first, the countryside outside the window seemed ordinary enough. Fields stretching into darkness, tree lines rising and falling along low hills, the faint outline of fences appearing whenever the carriage lamps reflected across the rain. The rhythm of the wheels beneath the floor remained steady and calm. Then the train slowed. Not by much. Just enough that the passing shapes outside the window became clearer. A small platform appeared beside the tracks. It held a single wooden bench and a narrow signpost, both shining faintly in the rain. A lamp hung above the platform, casting a quiet amber circle onto wet boards that looked newly polished by the weather. The sign carried a name I had never heard before. Bellwether Junction. I leaned closer to the glass, trying to see if there were buildings nearby, or perhaps a road leading away from the platform. But beyond the lamplight there was only darkness and the suggestion of trees. The train did not stop. It moved past with the same patient motion it had carried since leaving Briar Glen Crossing. Soon the platform slipped behind us and vanished into rain. I sat back slowly. Maple Hollow had only 2 nearby stations that still appeared on modern railway charts, and Bellwether Junction was not one of them. I was certain of that. Yet the platform had looked real in every detail. The elderly woman near the window seemed to notice my expression. She smiled gently as though she had seen that same look before. "Some stations remain," she said softly, resting her hand on the lid of her music box. "Even after the timetables forget them." Her voice carried no mystery, only quiet understanding. Outside, the rain continued falling. And somewhere ahead of us, another unseen station waited in the dark. The train continued through the rain with the same calm rhythm, its wheels turning softly beneath the carriage floor. The passing landscape seemed to unfold in patient layers of darkness and faint lamplight, revealing small details only for a moment before they slipped away again. For a while no one spoke. The elderly woman kept one hand resting lightly on her music box, as though feeling its familiar shape was enough to keep her company. The young man with the notebook had stopped writing and now watched the window thoughtfully, his pen balanced between his fingers. Across from me, the woman with the tea noticed that my coat was still damp. Without ceremony, she reached into a small bag beside her seat and placed a folded cloth on the empty place between us. "For the rain," she said gently. Her voice carried the quiet steadiness of someone used to observing small things others might miss. I thanked her and used the cloth to brush away the lingering drops from my sleeves. The warmth of the carriage made the dampness fade quickly, leaving behind only the faint scent of wet wool and tea. "Does the train always travel this way?" I asked after a moment. She considered the question with calm patience. "It travels where it is needed," she replied. The answer did not sound mysterious when she said it. It felt practical, almost ordinary, as though she were describing a road that had existed longer than the towns around it. Further down the carriage, the young man finally closed his notebook. "I was trying to describe the rain," he said, half to himself, half to the room. "But it's difficult to write about something that changes every minute." The elderly woman smiled again. "Rain has always been like that," she said. "It reminds us that nothing stays still long enough to belong completely to words." The conversation ended there, not because it needed to continue, but because it had already reached its natural end. Outside, another faint platform lamp appeared through the mist ahead. And once again the train began to slow. The train slowed again, gently enough that the change felt more like a deep breath than a stop. Through the rain-streaked window I saw another small station emerge from the mist. A single lamp hung above the platform, its light soft and golden against the drifting rain. Beneath it stood a narrow bench and a sign whose letters were faded by years of weather. No building stood nearby. No road led away from the tracks. The place seemed to exist only for the train. As we passed, I noticed something else. The bench was dry. Though rain fell steadily all around it, the wood beneath the lamp remained untouched, as if the light itself kept a small circle of calm. For a moment I had the strange feeling that someone had been sitting there not long ago, waiting. Then the platform slipped behind us, and the mist closed quietly over the tracks once more. Thank you for staying with me as we traveled through the quiet rhythm of the rainy night train, where soft lights passed beyond the windows and forgotten pieces of history moved gently beside us. If this journey brought you a sense of calm, you're welcome to like and subscribe for more peaceful stories to accompany your evenings and guide you toward rest. Sleep deeply tonight. Let the distant sound of rain, the steady motion of the train, and the quiet echoes of history carry you gently into peaceful dreams.